Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another movie discussion where I just talk about movies that I've watched. For today's episode, I'm just going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Obviously, it's taken me a while, but this is just going to be a general spoiler discussion. I'm just telling you my thoughts about everything and just kind of recapping the story as we go along as well. I'm going to do my general thoughts, but I'm not going to actively go out of my way to talk about spoilers, but just give my general thoughts initially. I should also talk about the fact is there will be time codes in case you want to jump around to the different topics I'm going to be discussing over the course of this. But first and foremost, general thoughts. Thought it was a spectacular movie just in general, but also just a spectacular way to close out the Guardians of the Galaxy. At least this version of the group that we've come to know over the course of these now 9 years, basically. So it was so beautiful and emotional and sad, and just like, once again, what these movies nail, and I think it's one of the things that James Gunn nails so well, is the family unit, the misfit group put together that ends up leading to this beautiful makeshift family. And after everything that the Guardians have been through, just the opening in itself, where it's just like Rocket, and well, the opening is rock stuff with young Rocket, which we'll get to like in a little bit, but also the fact is that, Peter's still drowning in his sorrows about the Gamora thing. Like, obviously this is post the holiday special, but it's still a sore wound for him that he's still not dealing with it properly. And I think that's this interesting theme throughout this movie, is this whole element of kind of running from your past and kind of having to face it. It ends up being something that each member of the Guardians kind of has to face to some extent, of just kind of things that they've been running from. So we'll kind of get to that more as we kind of really deep dive into the spoiler discussion. But like I said, it's a roller coaster of emotions. Obviously, it's your typical fun but also dramatic, fashion that the Guardians have always been, and it just tugs on your heartstrings. Obviously, if I had to rank them, I'd probably say, because I know some people like one better than two, but I'm the person that I think the Guardian movies have gotten better and better with each one. But once again, to each their own, right? So right now, this is easily my favorite Guardians movie. I don't do the whole MCU ranking situation of where it is. I just haven't taken time to do that. Probably never will. But regardless, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. And like I said, I think it was a nice closing chapter for what we know of the Guardians and what this means for the MCU going forward. Because I think it's so interesting, because I think the Guardians do this really interesting thing where it is this isolated story of, like, yes, it is a galactic story, but it is still its own thing, which, better or for worse, I'm sure for a lot of people it works, because it's like, right, it's not as interconnected as everything. You can just follow the Guardian movies. Granted, you would still need to have Infinity War and Endgame knowledge, which that in itself would need 10 years of the MCU. So it's a whole thing, right? But these movies still are just kind of like their own pocket story, which I'm sure people appreciate, where it's like, okay, there's little things sprinkled here and there, but it's just, I'm trying to think in the grand scheme of things, like, there wasn't too much that was like the greater MCU. I mean, the Guardians themselves would be. It's just kind of like, all right, that's where things kind of stand on a more galactic, cosmic level. So that's all you really get, like, on the grander scale of the MCU. But the story, it's like, even though it's planetary, different planets and stuff like that, it's still small scale. Once again, it's ironic considering we're talking about, like, space travel and stuff like that. But it's this very pocket story, this very intimate story. So that's what these Guardians movies always kind of nail, and they continue to even at the end. And so, like I said, those are just kind of my general thoughts going forward. Obviously, like I said, we're just going to deep dive, or even go further deep diving into the story. So first and foremost, let's start off with Rocket's backstory, finally getting that context. And yes, the story ends up being as heartbreaking and as gut-wrenching as we all went into thinking it was going to be based on the trailers. Even James Gunn preparing people like, oh yeah, this is going to be a sad movie. But the fact is that Rocket, his circumstances, his upbringing, and just being created by the High Evolutionary, his backstory also adds so much depth. And like, because one of my favorite Rocket moments is from Infinity War. There's that line when he's talking to Thor, because Thor's like, oh, I'm a do this because I have nothing left to lose. Like, what do I have left to lose? Because, like, and then Rocket's like, well, I have a lot to lose. I could lose a lot. And ultimately, what ended up happening, he did. The only people that were left amongst the Guardians was him and Nebula. And she wasn't even an official Guardian yet, but like everyone else was gone. Gamora was killed by Thanos, and everyone else disappeared in a snap. I mean, literally Groot, like, got snapped right in front of him. So it's just like, and now you parallel this with the only other friends he's ever had in his entire life. Like, what happened to them? What happened to Lydia? What happened to Floor? What happened to Teeth, rather. And that is so gut wrenching because they had this dream of like, yeah, let's go out there and we'll see the sky, and it'll go on forever. And he ended up kind of living that dream. Obviously, it took a long time because we have no idea how long it was between all that stuff in the past with where he met up with the Guardians in the first one. We don't know how long that was. They didn't really give a timetable, but the fact is that he had been on his own for so long, and then he eventually met Groot. And because Rocket's the type of person, once he latches on to someone, he's never going to let them go because they mean the world to him. He won't always say it. That was always a big issue that he didn't always kind of, especially in 2 was kind of that issue, especially with the group kind of had their blowout like they did. But Rocket's not always the best at confessing how he really, really feels. And so I think that is this beautiful thing of just like this parallel of like, right, he lost the people who were the only friends he had, the only people he loved, his family first. Then he eventually found new friends, new family, lost them during Infinity War, but got them back in Endgame. And it's just like he's been carrying all that. Even later, the Guardians are like, why didn't Rocket ever tell us about this? To be fair, none of them all fully deal with a lot of their trauma either. I mean, and once again, it is that aspect of everyone is running from something. And I just think that's this heartbreaking but so real and powerful theme in this movie. Rocket's been running from his past the entire time, and it's like, because he was like, you could tell how the High Evolutionary treated him. It's like, he had these moments of sweetness, which I was like, oh, that's weird. But then you see the way he grabs Rocket's head sometimes. Like, it's almost like this reminder of like, at any moment, I could squish your head. Like, your existence is just that to me. You are means to an end to me trying to create this perfect world, And he wanted, what I thought was kind of an interesting moment is when he was like, I don't know if he was drunk or whatever, but he was upset at Rocket because it's like, okay, this issue I've had where I'm trying to like basically expedite evolution in all of these animals into more perfect species, I keep failing because there's an aggro element to them that I'm making them aggressive rather than peaceful like you guys. So there was that missing part to it all, right? And Rocket ended up figuring out pretty quickly what the issue was. And he was berating Rocket later. It was like, how you, a meaningless thing, 89P13, how is it possible that you figured it out? I took it as like his ego couldn't let him process that. It's like, no, you're my creation. You're nothing but a bunch of clay clumps of stuff I put together. How is it you figured out something I couldn't? That's why it's like, right, I'm after your brain and nothing more. But I think there's still that egotistical side thing. It's like, no, I'm the creator. I'm supposed to be smarter than you. How are you smarter than me? Like, he couldn't fathom that. That's also why he couldn't let Rocket go. Despite everyone saying like, you have this obsession with Rocket, he couldn't, because there was something out there that was kind of in some ways greater than him. It's more so in the way of he sees Rocket as the solution for any issues he has for creating the perfect species, so on and so forth, right? But I think there is some twinge level of you are feeling so inferior to Rocket because it's like he figured something out. The thing you made, the thing that should be lesser than you, figured out something that even you, with your great intellect, still couldn't figure out. It showed that Rocket was smarter, clever, and more clever than you were. And I think that comes full circle when you kind of get the final fight, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But I just think that's such an interest, like that really captured me. I was like, oh, like you've, like I said, at least that, like, it might not be all of it, but I do feel like that is a core aspect, and that also plays into why he won't let Rocket go. Once again, you're a means to an end. I need your brain so it can help, but it's also like, how can it? No. You're nothing. You're meaningless without me. So why is it that you're something special? And Rocket was like, the moment he learned that, it's like, oh, you're not going to create this utopia for us. We're the test subjects so that you can perfect stuff for the creatures that eventually will have this perfect world counter Earth, So I thought that was so interesting. And well, I'll go ahead and talk about it because his plan was to I'll finish my thoughts about Rocket's past really quickly. But he ended up trying to get everyone out of there. And Lydia was the first one to die. I was like, because I was hoping in the back of my head that when it's all said and done, I was like, okay, maybe Rocket ran away, but they're still alive, and maybe he'll end up having to confront them later on. But it's like, no, all of them were killed. First Lydia, then Floor, and Teeth. Like the only friends he knew in this world. And when Lydia died, he built ballistic. Because I was like looking at it, I thought it was like interesting because the High Evolutionary, you see what he looks like present day. I'm like, what happened to you? And I was like, it might have been Rocket when he escaped. And lo and behold, Rocket ripped into him. I love that we don't actually see the aftermath of what it fully looks like until the end. But you're like, okay, so there definitely was some pretty severe damage done. But Rocket also blamed, he is also why he ran away, because he blamed himself, because it's like I should have left, because Floor was like, you, me, and T, Rocket, we go, and he didn't. He was so caught up in his revenge, which I think also plays into the ending too, where it's like, because he was so caught up in his revenge, he didn't get his two remaining friends out of there before trouble arrived. And I think it also speaks volumes that, as I write, there's not supposed to be any aggression in them, but look at Rocket. Like, the fact of the matter is, because no matter how much you program someone to be something you want them to be, maybe it's supposed to be a flaw in Rocket that made him have these emotions, but he had these bonds, and the moment you broke them, once you killed the people he cared about, he snapped, and it made him like more than what he is, more than the sum of his parts. Because all the High Evolutionary could see was what he used to make Rocket, not realizing like he is greater than the sum of his parts, that he became something more. He had evolved in a way that the High Evolutionary hadn't accounted for, which, I think it's so interesting too, and this might be another thing where I'm reading too much into it, but when he gets back there near the end of the movie, and he opens the cage, and what does he see? He looks like, commonly known as Racoon. And now part of me, and like I said, I could be reading too much into this, was wondering, is that why Rocket never really liked the term Racoon? I mean, granted, he always was like, Racoon, what is that? He never knew what it was, but part of me wonders, and this could be like some retconning, but I feel like you could still fit it within the continuity just to be like, yeah, Rocket doesn't know what a raccoon is, what it actually is, but he hates that term so much because it reminds him of when he was captured, because he probably did vaguely remember that, but it's almost like he took that back at the end of the movie. It's like, I'm Rocket Raccoon. Like, that was so beautiful in that regard, but I wonder, is that why he's always had such an issue with someone calling him a raccoon? Now, like I said, I could be reading way too much into that, but I feel like you could kind of extrapolate that a little bit. Like I said, it could be a thing of, yeah, James Gunn didn't think about that at the beginning. He just thought of it as a funny bit, but now he was able to tie maybe some emotional connection to it. It still, I think, could fit in continuity-wise, because he'd be like, oh, like, I know I'm supposed to be, like, I'm labeled as a raccoon, but I actually don't know what an actual raccoon is until he gets to the end. Or maybe it's just a thing of like, hey, I don't know what this thing is, and now it could. That's my thought. But now, sitting here now I'm talking about it more and more. It could easily just be a thing of, well, now I understand. These are raccoons. This is who I am. It's like for the first time he fully had, like, now being able to confront his past allowed him to fully accept all that he is, because he's been once again running from part of himself for his entire life. So that's how I kind of like put that, at least in my head. So let's speak about the High Evolutionary. Man, when you get like villainous villain of just kind of like, I'm better than you, I'm trying to create a more perfect society, because he talked about the fact that he had visited Earth some time ago, and it's like, if it wasn't for the ignorance and the bigotry, then but it's so interesting that you are so far up your own ass that you can talk about like, oh, everything that Dave done wrong, but refuse to see, because no, what I do is for the greater good. I'm trying to make a perfect world, a perfect society. And anytime those worlds don't meet his standards of what's perfect, because it's like, because I think there's also, once again, that egotistical thing of, well, it's like, it's never in his mind, it's never his fault, it's theirs, because it's like, oh, if they're not perfect, it's on them, I'm just gonna have to start over again, never thinking that maybe the perfect, because the beings are this is one of those instances of things are perfectly imperfect, and the flaws and all are what makes us all us, unique and interesting in our own ways. But he wants things to kind of fit this bubble of what this diagram of like what he wants things to be, because I think for him, if he admits like it's failure on his own part, then because he's the one that's flawed. He's not perfect. It's like, who dictated that you should be the one that, try to make the world perfect? He thinks he's saving the world he's saving everything by creating a perfect world and society. It's like, because he's saying like, I don't want to conquer the world. Because I love that conversation when Pete's like, yeah, so on and so forth. Okay, I don't care. You're another whack job. Impudent whack job whose mother didn't love him, and now he wants to conquer the universe. It's like, no, I want to conquer the universe. If he made it, but in the process of making his perfect world, he is killing and sacrificing so many creatures, burning so many worlds to the ground. I mean, jumping ahead, the fact is, that is heartbreaking. They couldn't say that entire planet, like, we didn't see like the aftermath, but that entire planet was screwed up. Like, that was a whole society that is gone now because they weren't what he wanted them to be. They were a reflection of humans, because even Pete was like, yeah, like someone beating someone up after like trying to sell them coke, that's not perfect. He's like, you're right. And that's why he was like, he's like, oh, I just have to start all over again. Like the malice and the callousness in which he does that, because once again, it's like, it doesn't even register him because all emotion is removed from him. But it's so interesting that despite all that, he still gets angry and he gets obsessed. He has no... It's like he only has the negative feelings. He never has the more positive ones. So it's just such an interesting and hateful... It's one of those villains you're like, oh yeah, he's going to go down as one of those villains you love to hate, because you're just like... it's just like he's the most despicable villain, just because you're just like... Because there's at least some villains, like a Killmonger, where you're like, you don't agree where he's coming from, but you understand why he feels and does what he does. Like, this is just one of those, no, you're a villain, you're just a garbage being, and you suck, thinking you're better than it. Once again, you had the name High Evolutionary. You always look at yourself as above. Even the way he treats the creatures that are under him, who eventually, like, even one of his leads was like, no, you need to stop. Like, we need to retreat. But he was like, no, we're not leaving without 8, 9, P13. It's like his obsession was his undoing. That what you consider one of your greatest failures while also being your greatest success ended up being your undoing as well within Rocket. Because he was a failure, just that he was nothing. The only thing important about him was his brain, and that's just something you could study and pass on. Because no other experiment was able to reach the capabilities that Rocket was. And I'm assuming like everyone else there, those who turned against him were people that, some of them were at least people he made, maybe. Or maybe they were just people under his, like the main two, like the one who ended up having the code they needed for Rocket. Like we'll circle back to filling in a lot of those discussion points as well. But I'm curious, were they made, or were they like very much like the others? I mean, because it seems like his foundation is he takes creatures. He doesn't build anything from the ground up. He takes creatures and he modifies them. So, right? So I'm assuming, because some of the people there just look like regular beings, while others look like his two like assistants, like you could tell like they had mechanical altercation, like not altercations, modifications is the word I'm looking for. So I'm curious if, I mean, once again, it's just that thing of like, I was thinking like maybe some of those people were just people he hired, and some were just people like he kind of created, like Rocket in them, or like kind of built from other things. But like once again, a lot of your creations, every one of your creations turned against you in the end. And what did he do? He burned it all to the ground. It's like, well, then I'll just start again, type of thing. So very devilishly evil, and not in the devilishly charming evil type of way, just like pure evil villain. So might be one of the most despicable villains the MCU has ever had, in my opinion. But yeah, kind of going in on other aspects, this all started because the real pop off, and it happened way earlier, because we're catching up a little bit with the Guardians. I think the only things we really gotten from the holiday special, one thing I thought was kind of interesting, it's in the post credits, what I thought was kind of cute, was Kevin Bacon was telling his story about being abducted. So I thought that was kind of like a neat little wink and nod to the holiday special. So I thought that was kind of neat. I mean, because the holiday special acted as kind of like a Guardians of the Galaxy 2.5. I mean, it's still, like I said, continuing a lot of those through lines from that, and even the situation from the beginning of Love and Thunder. But either way, picking back up what I was saying, you had your boy Adam Warlock just busting through, coming after Rocket. It's been a while since I've seen either of the Guardians movies, but I didn't remember. I didn't remember the Sovereigns actually being. This might have been the first movie that referenced that the Sovereigns were actually created by the High Evolutionary. He created a lot of species around the universe, but even he was kind of like, oh yeah, you were just something I was kind of like messing around with. I was just trying to see how something would work. Like, you're nothing special, even though they hold themselves in such high. I mean, I think it's so interesting because he brings up the whole thing about them having such an ego. It's like, it's so ironic that once again, it's like your creations are a reflection of you, that you look at them as failures. It's like, but you refuse to think like, well, if they're failures, I'm failure. It's like, no. It's just on their part that they're failures. It's on them and not me, the quote unquote creator. Because he even got on them about the fact is that they had Adam Warlock being sort of their god. But I was also curious because I don't know, I've only seen one trailer. I don't remember if it was the teaser or the first trailer, but I avoided a lot of stuff for Guardians even up to this point. So I actually didn't know what accent Will Poulter was using for Adam Warlock, but he's kind of using his own accent, which I thought was kind of dope. But I do love that he was released, because the last time we saw Adam Warlock, he was still in kind of that container. So I thought the Sovereign released him, but it's like, no, the High Evolutionary did. And it's like, yeah, but he's, even after all this time since Guardians 2, he still wasn't ready yet, because he's still kind of an infant child, even though he looks the way he does, as powerful as he is. And he wrecked the Guardians. Like, everyone was getting, like, the way he was, like, ripping into, like, beating up Nebula, and then Drax, it's like, oh, man, everyone was catching hands from him, and he's just, like, messing the place up. I even love Kraglin trying to use the thing, and the whistle thing, and it didn't work. And I just love him be like, who threw that at me? And just Kraglin's hiding behind, and there's a woman beside him crying. He's like, shut up! And he's just like, baby, like, who, I guess whoever it is that tried to attack him as a baby for hiding. But I love that, like, it just like whipped and hit his face and did absolutely nothing. So but also, because if I remember correctly, didn't Nebula get that new arm from Rocket? I'm blanking on where she got the arm from. I don't think that was a Guardians 2 thing, or it's like, not unless it was an in-game situation. Infinity War. No, it had to be like, if it was maybe an in-game thing. I really, really don't remember. I feel like, because I remember the gifts I vaguely remember the gifts at the end of the holiday special, so I don't remember if that was, because I know, didn't Rocket get Bucky's arm? Because that might be Bucky's arm that he retrofitted to give to Nebula, maybe. Like I said, I don't remember. Do correct me in the comments down below. But yeah, like, her like sneaking up behind him and like stabbing him, and like he ended up running away, but Rocket got severely injured in all of it. And it's just like, yeah, like, you got to go save your best friend, and Drax being like, second best friend. I love that recurring bit. But yeah, that's what popped all of this off, is like, they need to save Rocket, but because of the way the High Evolutionary has like a device set up inside of him that if you tamper with it, like, basically it'll kill him. So if they don't help him, he'll die. But if they do try to help him, he'll die. So they need to find his code and basically use it to be able to like deactivate the device so that they'll be able to save his life. So that's what sets them off on their journey. Kraglin and Cosmo are left behind to kind of watch over Nowhere while they go do this, because it's like, it is these beautiful sad moments that, despite them being siblings, that Mantis still has to deal with the fact is that no one listens to her. She kind of gets brushed off a lot, especially Drax, but once again, we saw that that complicated relationship they had, because I thought something would eventually happen between them, because it seemed like they were setting that up in Volume 2. We were leaning into it even more in this the holiday special, but jumping ahead, like, nothing ever did happen. Doesn't mean it couldn't possibly happen in the future, but I thought that for sure they would have gotten together. Just like the whole, like, I love her recurring bit is to make him fall in love with things, or make things fall in love with him, because he's like, yeah, you made me fall in love with my sock, and she's like, yeah, because it's fun. It's funny because it's like, oh yeah, because he was saying like, oh, can't you use your powers to do something? She's like, no, I'm not gonna like use my powers to control a living being. It's like, well, you made me fall in love with my sock. She's like, yeah, because it's fun. Even does it later on, and I love that awkward moment where she's making the guy fall in love with Drax, and Drax is like, yeah, my name's Drax the Destroyer. He's like, I'll be here when you come back. He's like, yeah. He's like every time, and she's just getting like the biggest giggles out of it. I love it. It's just I really love like that back and forth dynamic. And he tried to offer Peter like one of like his Zog nuts or something. And during their argument, she's like, oh, maybe I wanted a Zog nut. He was like, I can't. Well, there's none left now. And then he eats the last one. And was like, you're such a dick. But yeah, the moment Nebula mentioned that she had a contact, I was like, oh, because she never specified. It's like, oh, we're going to meet this guy that Nebula's. I was like, that's interesting. And then the moment we found out Gamora, was like, that makes a lot of sense. It's like, well, why didn't you tell me you were in contact with Gamora? So, because I didn't want you acting weird like this. He's like, weird like what? So she's obviously with the Ravagers, which I love the Ravagers rolling up on the Guardians like that. What I thought was so interesting too is like one of them is kind of like a red alien. I didn't see it on his hands, but it didn't like. Does he have a sling ring? Like, are you a trained sorcerer? Because he was literally opening portals, and it's like we're not gonna acknowledge that at all. So I mean, to be fair, we got it in Multiverse of Madness of like different species, like being trained, and it's kind of like it's there in the background. We don't make much of a point of it. So I'm like, so was this thing training and then like went to space and became a Ravager? Like, what's that thing's story? Like, we didn't really get to know. But yeah, now it's kind of awkward around Peter, and I love that bit of just kind of like, trying to talk to this Gamora. I mean, for all we know, she just, after Thanos and his army was wiped out at Endgame, she immediately bounced. And so she's just, I guess, been wandering around and just eventually met up with the Ravagers. Because once again, it's like she's in a future that's, she's years, like, because what? It's like, she ended up time traveling, like, what? It's like 10-ish years into the future, basically, because once again, this was like 2014 Gamora, so she was like time traveling at least like 10 years into the future, and this is a future. I mean, not only it's like 10 years into the future, a lot's changed, and it's got to be complicated where you're this Gamora and other people know you as part of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but you know nothing about that. You have no connection to these people. They're strangers to you. And it sucks for Peter because, like, when he sees her, all he sees is a woman that he loves. It's exactly the woman he loves, just they never met, and how different their story is because their adventures together is what brought them together. And now it's like, because for her, it's like, I'm not going to be that means of feeling that hole you have in yourself. Like, why are you using me to make up for whatever it is that you're trying to get away from? Because he's had so many people die in his life. So it's like, right, he's holding on to dear life. They're like, I'm gonna save Rocket because I've had too many people die on me. My mom, Yondu, and Gamora. But that's why he's almost trying to make up for it now, where it's like, oh, this is Gamora here. So it's like, it's almost like you didn't die, but his Gamora did. So he is trying to fill that void of like running away from his pain. Once again, everyone is. I thought that was actually this beautiful conversation that Mantis has later on where she was like, yeah, everyone hates themselves. And it's like, when you look at the Guardians, like a lot of them do deal with a lot of self-hate and pain that they're running from. It's like Drax is like, oh yeah, like he's the happy one and funny one, but it's also like, yeah, that's, yes, he's stupid, but let him be happy and all this and that. And it's like, you think I'm stupid? And she's like, yes. He's like, oh, and she's like, forget. It's like, how many times have you done that? It's like, which is also sweet, but also effed up because it's like, oh, you didn't want to break it because she wants everyone to be okay. Like, she is kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy therapist, She kind of soothed Ego, and now she's kind of doing the same thing for the Guardians in a lot of capacities. So, because once again, like, Mantis kind of gets the short end of the straw so many times, especially throughout this movie. It's like, oh, she accidentally put their space suits in like that a thing that ejected, but it's like, Gamora, oh, it's easy for you to point it out now. No one told me that's what was happening then, I just thought that was so interesting. And then, like, when they're with that woman, Aura, he's, like, explaining everything that happened. And even Nebula's like, that's not all that happened. He's leaving out some important details, but that's kind of the gist of what happened. Kind of explaining, like, his and Gamora's story. I love that. It's, like, to a complete stranger, too. because he's trying to like show like, hey, like, you know, I can like, hey, we don't have to get crazy. Like, I can just like woo her and it'll be fine. And he's like, come on, you don't have to threaten her with a gun. Like, we were vibing for a minute. She's like, actually, I thought you were a douchebag. And he was like, oh, come on, you don't have to go that far, Ura. But I thought that was, I love that whole bit. And also Nathan Fillion, I love that he's referencing something. The guy's like, oh yeah, he's like, yeah, I just made that up. He was like, oh, I thought you said something else. So later on when he's talking, he's like, oh yeah, this is the boss's nephew. And because like Drax is acting like an idiot, he's like, he's a little, and then Nathan Fillion's character's like, I totally got you. He's like, I got one of those too. He turns to one guy, he's like, this guy, he's a star, he's amazing, he's great. But this guy, and he just looked at the guy behind him like with such disdain. He's like, I thought you said something else. Like, shut up. It's like, I love that so much. I love that bit. But yeah, he's Peter's very good at like, you know, flying by the seat of his pants. I mean, that's kind of his go-to move. I mean, he even acknowledges, I think this is the first time he's ever outwardly acknowledged like, yeah, I'm kind of the reason why half the universe got destroyed, because I went ballistic and kind of lost my cool and started like pistol whipping Thanos, and that led to, you know, shit going super pear-shaped during Infinity War. So I think that's the first time they've had written dialogue specifically about that, and Peter being the one be like, yeah, I kind of was responsible. I kind of helped destroy like half the universe by me doing what I did back then, you know? So I even love Nebula referencing, because I love Peter being like, wow, this Gamora is just mean. It's like, oh, she's always been like that. Yeah, I'm the bad guy. It's like, yeah, she does kind of get a lot of the guff, but it's like, I mean, to be fair, once again, this is, because we didn't get to spend a lot of time with this version of Gamora. She changed a lot because of her experience with the Guardians. So we saw that she was kind of rough and tumble, very much like all the Guardians. They were all kind of selfish, out for themselves, you know, but, you know, so, because this is the Gamora that was still right, like, once again, she was still right under Thanos' control, like under his thumb, like at least like, because she didn't run into Thanos again until Infinity War. So those were years of her kicking with the Guardians that kind of changed her a lot. Once this is a Gamora that was just still, so she's a little more, got a harder edge to her. I even love the whole thing of like, yeah, like if anything, like, he's like, because Gamora's like, I'm not the one that should be, it sounds more like Nebula. And they're both like, what? No, like, that could never, and he starts looking at her. I'm like, is that really going to be a thing? That's weird. It's like, oh, I can't be with Gamora, so I'll be with her sister, which Nebula's not going to be anyone's second choice. And she's like, stop looking at me like a lost little puppy. He's like, no, I'm just noticing how black your eyes are. And it's like, my dad replaced them, you know, after he was, as a form of torture. It's like, yeah, but I mean, he put a good set. It's like, shut up, Peter. Just shut up. But I do love he was able to convince Aura. It's like, right, let me talk to them like heart to heart. And Gamora's thinking he's stupid for even thinking that. I also love, it's like, we should kill someone to show that we mean business. Like that carrot guy. And the carrot guy's like, what? And then when they left, he starts sighing relief. The guy beside him was almost like, it's okay, buddy. It's almost kind of trying to console him. But, Peter convinced Aura like, oh, let me talk to them heart to heart. And she's like, okay, go ahead, speak to them from the heart. He was like, yeah, I'm not that much of an idiot. I just need to get into the system. He basically made their like jetpacks and stuff kind of activate. So he does have some common sense here and there, but he still went up to Gamora. Was like, I told you she was into me. It's like, just kind of proving a point there. So then they eventually have to go after the High Evolutionary, but Gamora doesn't want to go. And I love this moment where Nebula steps in. Because obviously Peter's saying like, right, you're not this person, you're with the Ravagers, like this is who you could be, but it's like, don't act like you know me. Once again, don't try and feel whatever you're missing inside of you with me. I'm not that Gamora, I'm me. My experiences have made me me. And she tries to punch him, but Nebula grabs him and it's like, that little Badger you're referencing and stuff like that gave me some like, you know, upgrades and stuff like that, and we're not going to sacrifice his life for your convenience. And she's like, I'm family. And then Nebula being like, so is he. And you could tell that took her back a second. It's like, once again, like she hasn't spent enough time with her, because she still thinks of Nebula as the daughter that was still trying to do everything for Thanos to get his approval. And it's like, for her, it's like, to hear Nebula talk, like, I mean, that was if I remember correctly, that was a moment in Endgame where it's like, wow, you're really very different from the sister I knew. And it's like, yeah, like she's grown and changed so much because of this ragtag team of idiots. love because she's so soft spoken in so many other times. I think that's the beautiful thing about Nebula. I mean, for about Mantis is that like when she gets like all like gets all like because she's so meekish and so quiet, but then like she has moments where she gets angry. I think that's so beautiful about her character. Just shows you how much she has grown as a character, as well. And but the moments her and Nebula had where it's just like, right, you're angry because you don't, and because Nebula is overcompensated because like she doesn't do well with her feelings. So she leans into angry because for her, like, Mantis and Drax being the bumbling idiots that they are, for her, it's like people could get hurt. It's like, it's already bad enough. Rocket is up there dying. I already lost my sister. Yes, this is a different version of my sister, but we had this really tight relationship. We really grew closer, and now that's gone. And now, it's like very much like Peter's holding on to Rocket of like, I don't want to lose my best friend. Nebula's in that same boat where it's like she doesn't want to lose anyone either. So it's very much like her journey is very similar to Rocket's in that regard of like, yeah, I've come to care for this group of idiots and I could lose them. And I think that's why she's so stern of like, everything's got to be right. To be fair, she didn't grow up with the best example of what it means to love somebody. Like, even once again, her relationship with her sister was tumultuous at best, So it's like having Thanos for a father, of course, that will make it harder for you to connect to people, and you're not always honest with your feelings. Mantis is the only one who kind of is. But once again, she gets berated by Nebula, and Drax is getting berated because it's like, right, he made mistakes, And once again, it's like being berated for something you don't know, especially because we're the two that kind of get left behind. It's like, yeah, their job was to look after the ship and Rocket, but it just, shenanigan-filled adventure. So I even love that moment where it turns out that Drax can actually speak the same language as those kids. And it's like, why didn't you tell us you could do that earlier? He's like, why didn't you ask? It's just like, oh, you're so literal, Drax. But it's also like I think that commentary that they had about Drax of like, oh, he's laughy and this and that, and they're like, oh, you think I'm stupid? It almost feels like this commentary that people had an issue with Drax's character, even something that Dave Bautista had an issue where the character was so jokey. Once again, I read it as, oh, I'm laughy, I'm jokey, I'm this way, I'm a very silly character to overcompensate for the tragedy that is that character. And so that's how I read it. I know some people have not read it out. And I understand people's criticism of like, right, Drax's character being kind of relegated to just the punchline character. But I think it is such an interesting little like peek into that where it's just like, okay, we acknowledge that criticism, but there is layers to that. And that it's like even Mantis being like, let him be the laughy, jokey person because at least he doesn't hate himself, I mean, because his need for revenge is going because Thanos is gone, but it won't bring back his family. So he's with his family now, and they're the ones that matter the most to him, It's like he couldn't protect his family, but he can still protect this family of his, But yeah, like that sweet thing where it's like, yeah, that father instinct where he's like, oh yeah, my daughter liked it when I made monkey sounds, but he started making robot sounds. It's like, how's that a monkey? I don't know. But it's like, yeah, but he also speaks their language. It's like, there's, once again, he's like Shrek. There's so many layers underneath. He's like Shrek in a way that Shrek is like an onion. There's layers, Like I said, it is just the shenanigans feel thing of like, all right, so Peter and Groot went to deal with the High Evolutionary, and they kind of had their escape plan, which we got Groot growing wings, kind of acting as a little bit of a glider / parachute. But at the same time is when Nebula, Mantis, and Drax were breaking into the ship, and I love that it's like they didn't see Groot, Peter, and that guy like flying by. Like I love that. So it's just like, wait, we're here to save you. It's like, no, we already left. I had a great plan, and Groot spoiled what it was. And it's like, wait, that was your clever plan you came up with? He was like, whatever, It's like he didn't really have much of a plan. Once again, flying by the seat of his pants. But it was that beautiful moment where just like, well, they got the code, they got it back to Rocket, and they thought like, oh man, Rocket's gonna die. It's over. And Rocket's having this beautiful afterlife moment where he's meeting up with Lila, who I had no idea, because I saw her name in the credits, and I was like, oh, it's Linda Cardellini oh god, she voiced Lila. Cause I saw her name and I was like, who is she in this? I had no idea that she was voicing Lila. Also, oh God, who else was it? Judy Greer was War Pig, the one that Adam ended up killing by snapping off its head. That pig kind of felt really, once again, you feel bad for every one of its the High Evolutionary's creations, but it's like I was like, oh man, just kind of getting some fellow MCU people just popping up in different roles. It's like, it's easy when there's voiceover. You could kind of skirt around some of that. But either way, I thought that was so interesting. But either way, having to work together, like with the whole nowhere and I know what the tangent I went on. Sorry, I have to back. I was about to move on to the next point. Going back, that moment with Rocket and Lila and Teeth and Floor was so beautiful. That's the part that broke me. Like that back and forth between Peter holding Rocket, be like, no, don't die. I'm not gonna let my best friend die. And Rocket being reunited with them. It's like, come on, like I can go with you guys, because he's like, I'm sorry, but they're like, no, it's okay. We're flying forever, and it does go on forever. That beautiful sky. And he's like, can I go with you? But she stops him, because it's like, but not yet. You've got a greater purpose out there. Like, you might not have realized it by now, but this is your story. Like, obviously this movie is Rocket's movie, but he has been this very interesting through line throughout all the movies. And so for it to be like his moment, she's like, my raccoon. And he's like, I'm not a raccoon or whatever. And he like pops back to life. And it's just this beautiful moment, especially when Nebula heard his voice, and you see that look on Mantis's face where it's like, for the first time, Nebula let her emotions out, because she was almost like she felt like she could breathe for the first time. Like, oh God, Rocket's okay. He's okay. Like, and Mantis saw that. And it's like, we love you, Rocket. Each and every one of us, is what Mantis was saying. He was like, well, you're idiots for that. It's like, yeah, but they care about you. It's like, yeah, they're idiots, but they're your idiots, But the point I was going to make next was like the combination of like pushing that ship and nowhere together. And obviously there's that army of creatures that were sent to infiltrate, and Kraglin had his moment, that beautiful moment where Yondu was like, kind of let your heart do the talking, and he sees Yondu smiling at him, and he does his thing. But it's not only him, because I love that bit between him and throughout the entire thing, it's Kraglin and Cosmo, and he keeps calling Cosmos a bad dog. It's like, no, tell him, say I am not a bad dog. And like everyone's playing cards with them. It's like, please, Kraglin, just stop it. And Howard's there, and the guy, I think he's from the first Guardians movie, maybe, being like wasn't he like a curator or something? Wasn't he the guy that I can't remember. I feel like he's from the first Guardians movie, but I don't remember. And Kraglin refused to like give up on the whole, like, oh yeah, like calling Cosmo a bad dog. But in that moment where that one guy came, one of the main threats came, and it's just like, oh, you're just a dog. And Kraglin's like, no, she's a good dog. And then she telekinetic like took two pieces of rubble and slammed and squished them together. And it's like, oh, I knew you'd do that. I was a good dog. It's like, all right, come on, you idiot. It's like, it's a very cute moment between them. But I love that. I mean, it's very like, I guess, Doug-ish from Up. I need to rewatch Up. I don't really remember Up that well, but it's kind of like, I mean, it's supposed to be representative, like, oh yeah, kind of the mind of a dog, just a dog that can talk and is telekinetic. But yeah, like I said, Kraglin also had his moment where he just like whistled, and like the thing like ripped through so many enemies. It's like, he kind of had his moment, which I thought was beautiful. But either way, smashing the ships together, the ship and Nowhere together, which didn't even talk about it. I love that. It's like, oh, Nowhere isn't just our HQ. It's also a flying fortress. I'm like, okay, it doesn't have full-blown weaponry. Maybe that'll be something modified going forward, but maybe they don't want it to be like a warship type of thing, so it might not ever serve that purpose. But the fact is that they were controlling it like a ship. I was like, that was really unexpected. But all the children being guided through and saved. It is kind of, it's just that, once again, that they were supposed to be his next generation of successes, especially if he took what he could learn from Rocket and applied to them, they could be the perfect species or whatever, so on and so forth. But I thought Rocket specifically was going to go try and find the High Evolutionary, because the point was like, oh, we need to get out of here. I mean, first they were there to save Mantis, Nebula, and Drax, but then Mantis had that sweet moment with those creatures. That's not the same thing that they killed in the opening of 2, is it? I don't think it is. But either way, she was able to calm them down, just Mantis doing what she does. Because once again, it's that moment too where it's just like Nebula's telling her to stand by, but she's like, no, I got this. Once again, like no one kind of trusting her enough to be like, I know what I'm doing. I've been just as because especially because earlier Nebula had kind of relegated him to only being the idiot that kind of screws things up, but her only there to kind of calm people down and talk about their feelings. Once again, kind of the therapist of the group. So it's like but she has her moment, and even when she kind of busts through with the others on the creatures, and it's like, right, we got to save Nebula, Drax, and Mantis. Oh, you guys saved yourself. It's like, yeah, but was that cool what we did? Which I love that. That's the recurring thing of like, yeah, that was cool what I just did, right? But yeah, going back to it, I thought Rocket was going to go try and find the High Evolutionary, but he decided not to. Especially because he had made that point of like, I'm not going to run anymore. Which also, I skipped over it. A fantastic action sequence. The camera work there, the twists and turns, and like there's even like these POV, like feel like first person shooter moments, like especially that group part where like you're just seeing his arm extended out and just like the combos, like at one point, like all the people that Peter was sticking with those electric things. You even see at one point he stuck one to someone's butt. But it was just such a beautifully executed scene, and I just loved how it flew together. And it's like, all right, let's show you what the Guardians can do when we do our thing. It's like there's innocent people here. Well, we're going to see this through. Rocket's not running, and we're not running. There's innocent people, kids that need to be saved, so let's do it. Locked and loaded, slash, and just even Gamora reluctantly. I was like, all right, fine. You idiots dragged me this far. But even she kind of started being like, all right, there's more to you guys than I thought. Because that moment where Rocket came back and they're hugging, and it's so beautiful when it's like Peter hugs him, and then Groot hugs him and kind of spreads his branches around, and then Rocket hugs him back. It's just like, the feels. But yeah, that was a beautiful action sequence. But going back to Rocket, he went to check on like the old cages they were in, and he saw all the different creatures that had been captured and experimented on. He found the raccoons and he let them out, but then he was looking at all the other creatures like, I can't just leave you here either. High Evolutionary came in, is like, this is your fault, start tossing him around. It's like, what are you, 8, you're just 8, 9 P13 or whatever. And Rocket turns on, I love bringing that back, those boots. He brought them back and he just falls to the ground and goes, I'm Rocket Racoon, and ends up blasting him, and then all of the Guardians like getting in their licks. I'm like, yeah, because it's like they know what he did to so many creatures, what he did to, I mean, even to the point Nebula was like, what he did to Rocket is even worse than what Thanos did to me. And in that moment, just everyone getting their licks, and you're like, yeah. Gamora getting the final stab in, and then ripping off his face, going full Red Skull, and Rocket refusing to kill him because he's like, that's what I was talking about before too, where it's like, I think that stems from, there are more important things right now. We all need to get out of here, make sure the children get out of here, and not just the children, but also the animals that he was experimenting, like they need to be saved as well, and they were. And I think that's supposed to, but like I said, I think it was a reminder for Rocket, like if I hadn't been so focused on my revenge on hurting him for what he did to Lila, maybe Floor and Teeth would be alive too. So at that moment, it's like, right, I'm not going to kill him. And it's like, why not? It's like, because I'm a freaking Guardian of the Galaxy. Like, I'm not going to get so driven by revenge. And I mean, that shows better strength and restraint than even Peter had when it came to the whole Thanos thing. I think that just kind of shows, and even later Peter saying like, that's what makes you be even better than me at this. So, but either way, I thought that was it's like, right, he ultimately ends up dying anyway. You'd assume so because the ship explodes. So, but it's like, yeah, like you are at the mercy of your own folly, your own ego was once again your undoing. And once again for Rocket, all this time, all these years later, to come back, that thing that was nothing more to you, where you're like, oh, the only thing important about him is the brain, but he's nothing special. And it's like that nothing special came back with his family and kicked your ass. I think that's beautiful. So I thought that was really dope. And just that final sequence with Peter too, where he was trying to make it, and just like I was wondering why he had that cable with him, but it was meant to like blow him in this direction of nowhere. But the problem is the debris there like completely halted his momentum, and he was out there freezing. I was like, it's the repeat of what happened in the first movie when he was like choosing to save Gamora over himself. But like no one can reach him because even Groot's trying to reach out to him but can't because his branches are freezing in that moment. But then it's actually Adam who saved him because, you know, I love that he's just popping in throughout the movie and just kind of getting taken down or locked up. I mean, it's really sad because, once again, he's a wandering child because his mom died, you know? It's like everything he did was just to kind of make his mom feel better, except for killing the pet because he really liked that thing. I love that whole bit of like him incinerating that guy, and she's like, I didn't tell you to incinerate. I was like, well, what more could we have gotten from him? And it's like, oh, and once again, Nathan Fillion's can be like, hey, I get it. I got one of those as well. But it's like, yeah, Groot saved him because it's like, yeah, everyone deserves a second chance. And he made good on that second chance and he saved Peter. And it's like, did that, what I did look cool? And everyone hugs around him. Everyone's there hugging. And even, I even love Adam standing there being like, and he kind of leans in and hugs too. The only one who didn't join the hugging was like Gamora being like, yeah, I'm not be all that touchy-feely stuff. But Gamora goes back to the Ravagers, and it is this heartbreaking moment where you're just like, yeah, like sadly they don't. I was surprised by that because I would have assumed like they definitely get together in the end. It's like, no, they don't, because at the end of the day, she is her own person. But it's like, yeah, but you might not be my Gamora. But the fact of the matter is, you being you ain't so bad either. You know, and she's like, I bet we were a lot of fun. He's like, more than you could even believe. And for things to kind of go that way, it's just, it's sad, you know? But for Peter, this was the moment he made the decision, because Mantis had talked about it earlier about, what about going back to Earth? You still have some family alive, your grandfather. But he was like, it's the trauma of like, right, it's just a reminder of his mom being gone. The only reason why he was on Earth was because of Endgame. But based on that, it just seems like after Endgame was done, they immediately took off. Because he's like, I kind of, you know, I got my family. This is all that matters. Because anytime like Mantis tried to bring it up, he's like, I'm talking about this, and Rocket want to say my best friend. You're talking about that. There's no connection. But it's like each one of them kind of dealing with stuff. It's like, I'm going to leave for a little while because I need to I've been running too. Rocket's able to face what he was running from. It's time I did that too. I spent my entire life running, never going back home, you know? Just, it's not because his grandfather kicked, like he knew on some level, like, but to be fair, you were an 8-year-old kid, your grandfather kicked you out of the room. It's like his daughter died. Wouldn't he want the last piece of her still out there in the universe back by his side? But Peter wasn't, like, he was just making excuses because he was too scared to go back. And that's okay to be scared. Each one of them is scared in their own right. And so he wants to go, and Mantis wants to go on her own too, because I've been following everyone else's orders. First Ego's, and now I did what the Guardians want. It's time for me to do what I want. And Drax is like, I'll go with you. He's like, you're weak. You need someone to protect you. But, you know, it's like he was making excuses because he didn't, like, it's like, right, we make a good team, and I enjoy not only our family unit, but I enjoy being around you. That's what I was like. I was so certain they'd be together. Them to not even be by each other's side, but it's like, no, you have a place here. She's like, I've seen it with the way you interact with those kids. Nebula's like, you are always, your purpose, you're always meant to be a dad. So I need you to take care of these kids. So it's like, right, is Nebula taking over the garden? She's like, no, I'm going to lead nowhere. This is going to be my purpose. I'm going to build this place up. I'm going to lead this city. That's my place. And it's like, so who's going to lead then? And they pass the torch to Rockets. Like, you're going to be better at this than me. Like, you've proven, and for that to be like, oh yeah, this is Rocket's story. And for him to become the new leader of the Guardians is a beautiful thing. And them all kind of like giving their, because I'd actually hoped that Mantis would have gone with Peter, because it's like, hey, they are a family, they are like half siblings and everything, but it's still like, no, this is something she's got to go through. And so her and Drax waving their goodbyes as she kind of goes with her new pets. So it's like, right, I got my bruisers with me, so I'm not alone. I can take care of myself. But she's on her journey of self-discovery, and it does beg the question, like, I mean, will this be the absolute last time we see any of these Guardians? Who knows? Because we know this is the end for some. Because I know, like, obviously Dave Bautista, like, will even make appearances in the future. Who knows? Because once again, it's like I'm getting older. I don't want to have to be getting this ridiculous amount of shape for this role. So there's that. Zoe Saldana's kind of made it clear that she was out, and obviously her going back to the Ravagers. It's like, right, the Guardians were her family, but just like everyone in this series of movies ended up finding a new family, so did she. But they might all be going their separate ways, but that doesn't mean that this is like the end. And I just think that's so, it's very sad to see them kind of all go their separate ways, but they're always going to be interconnected, you know, because I'm sure like Drax is going to be there with Nebula because she needs his help, and Groot's going to be with Rocket, and sadly Mantis and Peter are going their separate ways, but they're still family, and they'll always find their way back to each other, whether it'll be like a Secret War situation or what. But this ain't the last time we've seen this version of the Guardians, I don't think. I think that but that's also the complicated thing, because like I said, some of those people probably like Zoe and Dave, I feel like this will be, unless it's like a very specific circumstance, I don't think they're going to come back in any regular capacity. I don't know if Bradley Cooper would be interested in coming back as Rocket. I feel like this might have been his last rodeo as well. But we did, jumping ahead, get that ending where it's like, yeah, Star-Lord will return. So definitely Chris Pratt's really opened up to like continuing down this road, whatever that path may lead. I'm assuming Vin Diesel would always be willing to pop in for the Groot stuff. Which, I mean, we didn't get too much of it in this movie, but there is a whole, like, him going kaiju, which is kind of like his new thing. He only did it just to scare the townsfolk on Counter Earth, but yeah. But, and obviously leaving the Zune with Rocket and him moving to the next decade of songs, and that's the 2000s. And everyone, him, Nebula, Groot, and Drax all busting a move. Peter returning to Earth and meeting with his grandfather, you know? And I thought that was sweet. So, and then we meet our new Guardians of the Galaxy. It's the main little girl that Drax was interacting with. She's part of the crew, which I love that we're getting all these young generation, because we got Thor and his daughter. So we have now Rocket's kicking it with her. Cosmo, Kraglin is even more of an official member. Groot's still with him, and now Adam. Because I was about to say, like, well, they introduced him so he'd eventually end up with the Guardians, and lo and behold, he's there. And I love them gather around talking about the different music that they love, and it's like, all right, so on your word, Captain, and he's like, word, and that being the final shot before we got the, you know, post credits tease of Star-Lord will return. So like I said, it's really sad, like I said, to see them split up the way they are, but I think it is that beautiful thing of we might be going down our different paths, but everything we've done has mattered. What we've done as the Guardians will continue on with the new group, but also it doesn't change the fact is we may be in different places, but we are all a family, and that will never change. So I just thought it was kind of a beautiful ending. And like I said, it just feels so like it is its own thing, because we are closing out this chapter. So we have no idea what this means for the greater Cosmos stuff. The next cosmic thing we have coming up will be, because I don't know if any of this is going to tie into Loki, because I said Loki came out yesterday at the time of recording this. So this will probably go up Monday. But I didn't want to watch it until like I'm completely caught up with my MCU. And so I still hadn't seen this yet. So I'm curious. I doubt there's going to be any tie-in there, and you would assume maybe there might be some the Marvels connection, like maybe but it'll probably not. There might be some stuff you might get, like little things here and there, but probably nothing too major. So it seems like for now, this is where we're kind of ending off. I know that's the issue with some people, where it just feels like everything's so disjointed. That's always a complex thing of people like the connectivity, but they feel like the connectivity is kind of overridden. Like everything should just be an individual thing that ties in, but it feels like the tie-ins seem to be the more important thing rather than the core story, which I think this is an example of like, yeah, it's just an isolated thing. And yes, it ties into the greater universe, but bit by bit. And that's only just like what the Guardians are going to do going forward with the new set of Guardians, just doing what they've always done, obviously. But I'd also assume there'd be some crossover with Thor at some point in time, because he's just out and about too, like saving the day, being a hero with his daughters. The last time we saw him at the end of Love and Thunder. So we'll ultimately have to wait to see what the future holds for all of these characters, the Guardians as a whole, OG team, or the new team, or even the Ravagers, like what role they might play going forward. I didn't talk about it, but I'm thinking too much of it, but it's still got to be this funny situation where maybe I'm overthinking it, but it's just gotta be this weird thing where it's like, I mean, it took me a second to realize that was Jennifer Holland at that like organic place where like Nathan Fillion was, and it took me a second to realize like, oh yeah, that's her. I was like, oh, that's so dope. But also, it's just that funny thing of like Gamora shooting her in the leg. I was like, oh, that's got to be some weird thing where it's like, was that just like a last minute thing you did, or did you already have that in the script? Because it's like, hey, here's my wife getting shot again, because she just got shot in the season finale of Peacemaker and almost died. I mean, granted, this character, it's perfectly fine, but it's just like, I don't know, once again, I'm thinking too much about it. It's just funny. It's like, yeah, I can't remember if they were just like engaged at this point in time, or were they already married by the time they were filming this. Either way, it doesn't matter. I think it's funny. It's just gotta be this weird, it's just this funny thing that I really like. It's just like, once again, it's just one of those things like, oh, you overthink it too much. But either way, I'm very, like I said, very, very excited to see where this story potentially could take us going forward. Like, this chapter is ending here, but there's a brand new chapter just waiting to be opened and started at some point in time. And so I'm excited to see where things go from here for these characters, as well as, like I said, the MCU as a whole. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. I think I've done enough running my mouth for today. But to the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good.